Hello there, I am Kimada. So, hopefully by the time this video comes out, Pokemon Sword and Shield have been released fairly recently, like not too long, or this video is still relevant. But anyway, I'm a huge Pokemon fan. I've been playing every game since the beginning of Gen 4, and have been playing like every game since, you know? And I've enjoyed basically all of them. Maybe except for Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Those games were like the same game as Sun and Moon. Like, really? Well, anyway, I love Pokemon, but the series definitely has a problem. I know, such a revolutionary idea. There's no need to thank me. But seriously, Pokemon has kind of lost that magic that captivated me so long ago, and I've been sticking around hoping that someday it would come back, just like my father. I've seen a lot of talk about this in videos and discussion forums, but it seems like the common consensus is that Pokemon has just kind of become too easy. I don't think that's the root of the problem, but kind of rather a symptom, so to say. In the last few generations, Pokemon has been trying to do new things and add deeper battle mechanics, and while that won't necessarily make a game harder, I don't think it'll make a game easier either. So what really is the problem with modern Pokemon games? Today I want to talk about that, and what I think may be the underlying problems with the modern Pokemon games, and how Sword and Shield actually fit into that. I believe that its problem starts way early into production, before creating models, before programming the game, before drawing concept art. Now I know that's a big claim to make, and seeing as I don't have much of a foot in the Pokemon community or in game development as a whole, but I'll try my best to make a convincing argument with solid evidence. I think Pokemon has lost sight of its main appeal. If I were to ask you what the main appeal of a game like Super Mario Odyssey is, what would you say? I'd guess it's something along the lines of tight, fun, and creative 3D platforming, am I wrong? What about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? I'd say exploration, both of the map and mechanics of the game. What about Xenoblade Chronicles 2? I'd say an intriguing story and characters, if you know what I mean. Now, what is the main appeal of Pokemon? I'd say it's the Pokemon themselves. Finding and capturing new and different Pokemon to add to your team, and personalizing said team. Do you want to be a Fire-type trainer? Sure, go ahead. You want to have a bunch of cute Pokemon? Done. You want to have a well-balanced team ready to take on any situation? Easy. That's the main appeal, right? Well, it's kind of hard to feel that way in the most recent games. The games are super linear, they hold your hand throughout the entire experience, and just kind of throw gimmicks at you, not really enhancing your experience, but to make it different from what came before in any way possible. Pokemon has lost sight of their main appeal. So, before I get too in-depth with my argument, I'll talk about difficulty, well, lack thereof, as it seems to be the biggest complaint of the most recent games, and it's pretty easy to see why. It makes the beginning super slow and gives you no sense of accomplishment or ability to strategize in a turn-based RPG. The game kind of basically plays itself, but why are these games designed that way? Well, we kind of have to remember that Pokemon is a game for kids, and kids are kind of dumb. And don't worry, I can say this, it's okay, because I too am dumb. As a kid with playing Platinum, I had no idea what I was doing. I only trained my starter, and if it fainted, it was basically over for me, seeing as like my only other members were like level 10 if I'm at Gym 8. Sometimes I kind of get to the point where I was so frustrated I just stopped playing. The game holds your hand so children won't quit. Could they have done this better? Yes, they most definitely could have, but so many of other people have already said this before me, and they're a lot more detailed about it, so if you want a detailed response, you could probably go out to watch another video. They're not very hard to find. But just to kind of go over really quickly, they could probably create a program that affects the AIs in terms of changing difficulty levels, or Pokemon levels, depending on the difficulty you selected. Like, I have a little experience in programming, but I wouldn't imagine it be that difficult to put something into the game. You know, especially considering the size of Game Freak and the Pokemon company. Anyway, what I really wanted to talk about is linearity. Pokemon has always been kind of linear due to technological limitations, but as the hardware began to develop, Pokemon stuck with this linear progression, even diving deeper into it. Funky, which is I believe how you pronounce the name, talked about this problem in a video of his, Pokemon's Problematic Pacing.
Pokemon became a story game first and an adventure game second.
Funky talks a lot about how the lore of the game is presented to you, comparing Sun and Moon to Crystal, and I'd suggest you watch this video if you're interested in Pokemon's story progression. But he does mention a solution towards the end of this video, and I do think that it can solve a lot of problems with Pokemon's identity crisis, making the game non-linear. Like, you could do badges in whatever order you want, or maybe even choose a starting city or town. And that sounds pretty cool already, and allows for a lot more experimentation and replayability, like he said. But one of the problems that it does come up with that Funky doesn't really mention too much was how it would affect the story.
Like, you could raise an argument that minimizing story focus would just take away from the quality of a game, and starting wherever you want on the map might just affect your ability to follow that story. Mending these problems is really just a matter of making entry points to quests more flexible, but I can acknowledge the problem.
Like, this is a pretty big problem in terms of the way that Pokemon paces itself now, but I really don't think this should be too much of a problem, or never really should have become such a problem. Why? Well, let's think about modern Pokemon games, compare it to earlier ones. What's the story of Sun and Moon? Finding out information about Nebby and stopping the villainous team. What's the story of Red and Green? Becoming the champion, with Team Rocket kind of thrown in at the side. Trials and the League are completely thrown in the back seat in Sun and Moon, and feel like it's only really there to give you purpose to get out of your house and go on an adventure. But in earlier games, you went out to become the champion, and along the way you had to deal with evil teams. Defeating the team should not be an end goal, but rather a part of the journey, maybe even an optional part. What's the main story of Breath of the Wild? Sure, you can explore Hyrule and search for parts of the lore, complete shrines, defeat the Divine Beasts, but you don't really have to. If you want, you could just run over to Hyrule Castle and fight Ganon the second you drop off the Great Plateau. Why can't the evil teams be like this? Make them crime organizations like Team Rocket, rather than wanting to take over the world. Team Rocket's goal was to capture and sell rare Pokemon. Team Aqua and Magma want to destroy the planet. Sure, expanding the land or oceans would probably kill a whole lot of people in Pokemon, and is definitely more evil, but is it more interesting? I don't think so. Sure, Rocket was definitely smaller in terms of ambition, but they also kind of felt less cartoonish, like an actual crime organization instead of a big US conglomerate company. And besides, blowing up the goals of the evil team draws more attention to defeating the team rather than what the actual goal should be. Keep the team smaller and optional, or if you want the teams to still be involved in the game, tie their goals into the players. Instead of destroying the planet, maybe make Victory Road a tournament, and the winner gets to challenge the Elite Four and the champion. And maybe the evil team of the region is trying to rig the tournament or something. A small scale team that is still a huge threat to the player because they're messing around with your main goal, to become the champion. I actually really like that. Game Freak, if you're looking for a new story for your next game, hit me up, here are my credentials. Anyway, this way no part of the game's story will end up feeling like an after product. As much as I love Black and White and Black and White 2, I kind of felt like the ends were kind of like, meh? Like, the story and motivation of Team Plasma was super interesting and did fit into the story pretty well. Like, should we be catching Pokemon? Like, you kind of gotta really reevaluate what you're doing, but then the game kind of just, like, goes, oh no, it turns out Team Plasma was really just an evil team that wanted to take over the world. Like, it kind of feels like the Pokemon equivalent of Darling of the Franxx. But anyway, enough about the complaints I have with previous Pokemon games. It's time for my review of Pokemon Sword and Shield, so spoilers ahead if you care. Let's see just how does Sword and Shield address, or fail to address, some of the concerns of the fans, but most importantly, me, because if the game isn't exactly how I want it, then it's automatically bad. So I'm going to just quickly talk about the returning Pokemon list, and I actually don't find it that big of a deal. Like, let's be honest, were you really going to use Bulbasaur in your playthrough of Pokemon Sword and Shield? No, because if it was in the game, you couldn't actually catch it. Like, I don't see why the cut is this big. Like, it's pretty sketchy that all the models are reused and found in the game's code, but it doesn't really affect the player unless you decide to play competitive, which is a minority of the player base. And while you definitely shouldn't just ignore that part of the player base, I really don't think that it's this big of a deal. The visuals are not great. While I landed the camp of graphics not really being that big of an issue in games, I still do think there is an importance. Like, you don't need to have the highest polygon count, or even just 3D models to make a game look good. Personally, I think Gen 5 had the best looking games. Like, yeah, the games still were pixel based, but those sprites did look good. I was originally kind of disappointed seeing the 3D models for Pokemon X and Y. Like, they look fine, but they didn't really have the same kind of liveliness that Black and White animations had. But enough about Black and White's visuals, let's talk about Sword and Shields. Overall, the environments don't actually look that bad. I did like the layouts and aspects of quite a few towns and the wild area. Like, I really like the Fairy Gym City. I thought that place looked pretty good. But while the layouts look fine, there are a lot of problems once you start looking a little closer. The polygon count is pretty low and does not work with the rounded art style of Pokemon at all, and the textures look like they're lifted from a 3DS game. The same thing with the animations. The newer Pokemon look pretty good. I like their models and their designs are pretty fun. I like the new Ponyta, and to a lesser degree, the new Rapidash. I like Corviknight and the Drepiline, and Lulu is always super cute. And most, with an asterisk, and let me stress this asterisk, of the animations work well enough on the new guys, but the older Pokemon feel and look kinda bad. The animations are obviously reused from this game, as we already know about the models, but not only that, but animations outside of the Pokemon fights have also been recycled, as your rival Hop shares a few animations with Hau as well. Overall, the visuals of the game are just kind of lazy, kind of like me. Like, if you wanted to have a game with a low polygon count, that would be fine, but the smooth looking models look super out of place in these PS2 backgrounds. I would go on more about this, but plenty of other people already have, and if you're watching this video, you've probably already seen them. But if you haven't, once again, they're not too hard to find. The story isn't anything crazy, but I feel I should talk about it at least a little bit. The story of the game actually focuses on the Pokemon League instead of the evil team, which is nice, and doesn't really have a lot of large-scale events for most of the game. There isn't really an evil team to distract you from becoming the Pokemon champion. Instead, you remain focused on that goal for a large portion of the game. Along the way, you encounter Sonya, who tells you about the lore of the region, and Hop, Beedee, and Marnie, who serve as your rivals. They aren't incredibly deep characters, but they do have personality traits to separate them from each other. Your main rival, Hop, gets the most screen time out of all three, and is like, okay? Like, in the main game, he isn't particularly hard to beat, and his dialogue is super disconnected with how easy it is to beat him. And the game does acknowledge this to an extent, making the fact that Hop kinda always loses as part of his arc, which largely plays out in the post-game, actually. Like, I didn't really like him until I got to the post-game stuff, where he decides to become Sonya's assistant, who is now a Pokemon professor. Also, I don't really know where to add this, so I'm just gonna kinda put it into the story section. But there is no longer an Elite Four. Instead, you battle in the tournament before being able to challenge the champion. And I actually really like this change, but I wish it was longer. Like, it felt really small for the scope the game was trying to portray it as. Like, I wish there were more battles and some characters we just didn't really encounter yet. And maybe they could pop up again in the post-game. Anyway, on to what I think is the most important part of a game. It's Pokemon. I don't really know what else to say. Like, Pokemon has never been a hard game to beat. And I know that people complain saying it's too easy and whatnot, but like, what did you expect? The game doesn't have super deep mechanics like other games of its genre, or even super deep in strategy if you're just playing through the single player portion of the game. Like, you kind of just spam super effective moves, just like every other Pokemon game. But does this make it bad? Not really. Like, I've been talking a lot of trash about this game, but I actually did enjoy playing it. It did address my complaint about the evil team, so I was happy about that. And while the game is still pretty linear, you have a lot more choice when it comes to your team. For example, I really like Ice-type Pokemon. In most Pokemon games, you can't get an Ice-type until like the 7th gym. At this point, the game is basically over. Like, why does it take the entire game just to get the team I want to use? And while the game doesn't allow you to just go to whatever gym or city you want, the wild area has a large amount of Pokemon available from early on. As you progress through the game, you can always go back to the wild area and catch new Pokemon. In this game, there is a cap on the level of the Pokemon you could catch. The entire wild area is available from the beginning of the game, but you can't just run off and catch like a level 40 Steelix. As you progress through the game, the level cap is raised higher and higher, allowing you to catch more and more Pokemon. What's cool about this is there's a lot of different typings you could get early on. There are still certain Pokemon that are only available to catch later into the game, but you have a larger type diversity at the beginning. And while this isn't exactly what I was hoping for, it still is quite nice. However, a big problem with the wild area, and the rest of the game for that matter, is the render distance. It is super short. Like, you can only see a few yards in front of you. in terms of people and Pokemon. It makes the large cities feel super empty and unlived in, and if you're riding your bike in the grass, a Pokemon could just suddenly appear right in front of you. Maybe they'll patch that in the future, but as for now, that's my big problem with the wild area. A new minigame is added with this generation, which is the camping option in the menu. It's a fun little distraction from the main game and can allow you to play, albeit with limited ways, with your Pokemon. You can choose 2 different toys to play with, a little feather attached to a stick, I actually have no idea what this is called, and a ball that you could throw. You use these to get affection from your Pokemon just like in Generation 6 or the grooming feature in Generation 7. In addition to this, you could use different berries and buyable ingredients to make curry for you and your team. Making this could give you multiple benefits, including healing your party, restoring PP, or giving XP. Yes, XP, and that's not the only change to it. You get the XP shared from the beginning and you cannot turn it off. Why is that? I don't know. Like, you never really have to worry about being underleveled, but it's never really been a problem before in Pokemon games either. It's not too big of a problem though, but at least having the option to turn it off would be nice. But say somehow you still find yourself underleveled. What should you do? One of the big new battle additions to Sword and Shield are raids, and let me tell you, these things are actually pretty fun. They add battle conditions now, like finish the battle in 10 turns, or the battle ends after 4 Pokemon faint. They're a bit more challenging than the rest of the game and can allow you to snag some pretty neat Pokemon, including Pokemon with the capability to Gigantamax. For finishing a raid, you get some rewards as well, including the XP candies. Instead of the Pokemon you use gaining the XP, it will instead be given to you as candies, and you could use them as you please. They come in 4 variants: extra small, small, medium, and large. While the smaller candies give a decent amount of XP, medium and large candies can give you a ton of it. Even while using these on my level 50 Pokemon, they could get a full level out of them. And let me remind you that a medium tier raid, a 3-star, can get you about 1 to 2 large candies and 3 to 4 mediums. But what else can you get from raids? After finishing the raid, you are rewarded with TRs, or technical records. These are basically how TMs used to work back before Gen 5, single-use items that could teach a Pokemon to move. The TRs tend to have stronger moves attached to them than compared to the TMs, and I thought these were overall a nice addition to the game. The final important reward you get from raids is Dynamax Candy, and if you give these to a Pokemon, it will increase their Dynamax level by 1. Dynamax levels determine the health bonus you get when you Dynamax a Pokemon, and once you get it to max level, it will basically double your health. Well, speaking of Dynamaxing. So anyway, Dynamax? Bad. Well, actually, I do like the concept, like what it's trying to do. For the uninitiated, Game Freak introduces a new battle mechanic to Pokemon in Generation 6 called Mega Evolution, and damn, that was cool. Pokemon now have a new temporary evolutionary stage that they could access with a Mega Stone and Mega Bracelet, or Band if you're playing Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. The Pokemon would take an all-new design, as well as gain a pretty nice stat buff. You could only Mega Evolve 1 Pokemon per battle, and Mega Evolution was only available to a select few Pokemon. One of the main goals of Mega Evolution was to bring older Pokemon that were fading into obscurity back into the spotlight, or just bring back some old favorites. People seem to universally love it. And during the build-up for both Generation 6 games, there was a ton of speculation on what Pokemon would gain a Mega Evolution. Then came Generation 7, and Z-moves were introduced. Z-moves were, like, kinda cool, I guess? Maybe? Z-moves were kinda lame. Basically, once per battle, you could use a powered-up move as long as you had a Z-crystal of that move's type. In addition, some Pokemon had special Z-moves that they could use that were unique to them. Alright, those ones were kinda neat, I guess. Overall, Z-moves felt like a huge downgrade from Mega Evolution. Like, first we could go even further beyond Super Saiyan 3 with our Pokemon, and now we could just do a lot of damage with a crappy animation. Well, at least we have some new Megas to look forward to, right? So, Megas were actually relegated to post-game content in Generation 7, which sucked. Like, I get you wanted to give Z-moves the spotlight, but everyone loved the Megas. Why you gotta do us like that? Megas were cool, man, but at least they were there, even if it was after you finished a large chunk of the game, but whatever. The next time Mega Evolution would appear would be Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which I have played, but kinda forgot everything about. Big oof. Well, anyway, what about Megas in Sword and Shield? Well, there aren't any Megas in Sword and Shield, which kinda sucks. I know, but it's all good, we got Dynamax, right? Yay! So like, I totally understand what they're trying to do with Dynamax, but it kind of sucks too. It kind of feels like Game Freak is like, well, everyone loved Mega Evolution, so we could try to give every Pokemon a Mega Evolution, but we can't redesign like 500 Pokemon in a year. I know, let's make them big. Dynamax feels kind of lazy, and it appears that the game has quite a few corners, but I also think that they just kind of completely misunderstood what made Mega Evolution so special. It wasn't that they were just cool looking or that they were more powerful, it was that they were special. Mega Evolution was given to a few Pokemon, so not just any Magikarp could become a powerhouse of a Pokemon. They were old fan favorites, which really helped give it its charm. Dynamax on the other hand is for everyone, and sure there are a few special forms of Dynamax, but everyone can still do it. It's not something special or unique like Mega Evolution was. It just turns it into a stat buff that was for only a select few into something every Pokemon has access to. Now every Pokemon can be super.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.
I don't think Game Freak will ever really recapture the same interest that Mega Evolution had. In Arlo's Pokemon Had a Pokemon Problem video, he says that Game Freak is circling through different gimmicks to give each region a unique feel in an attempt to make no game better than the other, and I totally agree. It kinda sucks that there isn't really any improvements between games besides some quality of life changes, and given that Pokemon is an annual release, there isn't that much room in between installments to add these improvements. Now, while Dynamaxing is just kinda like meh, it's not too bad though. Unlike Mega Evolutions or Z-moves, you can only Dynamax your Pokemon in specific battles, so you can't just pull out Gigantamax Eevee against poor Bugcatcher Joe, but it is a shame that one of the big battle gimmicks is largely relegated to the background. I'm kind of conflicted about this game, because I did have fun with it. Like, the game didn't challenge me in any way, but it was enjoyable in the same way a Kirby game is enjoyable. It's not super hard, but it is a good way to relax. There are also enough things to do as a distraction if you ever find yourself getting tired of the main Pokemon battles, so you don't really get super bored. The camping is fun for a bit, and the raids are definitely the best part of the game. And while I did enjoy my time, I kept finding that I thought the game was also kind of lazy, as I said before when talking about the visuals. The game did address a few issues that I had, like the scope of the story and the evil team, but not too much outside of that. I don't particularly think this game is worth $60. Like, it's fun and all, but it kind of feels like a glorified 3DS game. Maybe like a $50 price tag would have been better to start out with. But should you play Pokemon Sword and Shield? If you like Pokemon, then yeah, I think you should. It's a decently fun mainline Pokemon game with some quality new Pokemon. And as a new fan, I don't think this would be a bad jumping on point. Like other Pokemon games, the game is beginner friendly, and there aren't an overwhelming amount of Pokemon to try to have to remember. If you are interested in the game, I would suggest to check it out, but maybe not over some other games. If you're looking for something more bang for your buck, and also a more challenging turn-based RPG, Persona 5 The Royal will be hitting the States soon, so I would probably wait until then. Anyway, if you like this video, please do tell me. The script for this is an absolute pain to write, so if people don't particularly enjoy this review, I might try changing the style up a bit more than I would have, or maybe just stop making them. I do know that I'll probably make these for the Persona 5 Scramble spin-off. Anyway, once again, I have been Kimada Kimpa. Melodic is way too annoying to catch in this game, and I will see you next time.